Vex on the feed.
So there I was, browsing my favorite website, the most trusted name in... Yeah, when suddenly I remembered something. I hadn't checked up on the top anime rankings in a while. See, there was a little experiment I had been running. I had made a prediction of sorts. A show by the name of Frieren Beyond Journey's End had made it to the #1 spot about a year ago, and I wanted to see whether or not it can maintain it for a significant amount of time. Lo and behold, I booted up the top anime, and what did I find? See, what you gotta understand is, back in the day, we didn't have these fancy animes like the 1000-Year Blood War arc, okay? Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood was considered unsurpassable. Not by me, I would never say that, but by my anime list. I mean, come on, you're gonna question the good word like that? But then along came the 2020s and eventually Frontier Airlines dropped. Oh, I saw the hype for this anime, but if you know anything about me, you know I like to wait for it to settle. And that leads us to about a week ago. Spoiler alert, it's a 5 out of 10 at best. Okay, let's do this right for once. Let's go Ralph the Movie Maker on this. We're gonna have a by-the-books review, no hitting below the belt. I'm gonna start with the things I like, primarily the animation. Which I gotta say, this is Madhouse's best work since the Lilo and Stitch anime. They even waited a whole 9 episodes before needing CGI reanimated armors that didn't even need to be CGI because they only have a couple of minutes of screen time before the main character instantly defeats them. And the CGI takes up even less screen time than that. And they didn't even need to move that much in the shots that they were CGI. And they fuck. This is supposed to be the stuff I like. Never mind, the animation's great, moving on. We also got the character writing that's pretty good for the most part. They really want you to care about everyone, even the minor people that are only there for like half an episode. Like, no one can say this isn't a lived-in universe, but keep in mind that's not in regards to any deep lore. If you've never seen this show before, all you need to know is demons used to be a problem and now they aren't anywhere near as much. Those of you looking for more meat on them bones might be disappointed by that though. I wonder how that feels. See, I'm dead inside, but even then I gotta admit I was expecting a teeny bit more than that. Admittedly, I did dip my toes into the show here and there while it was coming out, but I didn't really glean anything. And I foolishly thought that was because the plot was spoiler heavy. I also assumed Free Willy's personality was... a personality, especially after a clip I saw from the end of the Labyrinth arc where it looked like she was one of those quiet and emotionless type characters that's secretly an overpowered badass. Boy, did I miscalculate the fuck out of that! I mean, she's definitely overpowered and she's definitely emotionless often, but not to hide anything. There's no big twist waiting for you here. This isn't Madoka Magica 3 Revenge of the Sith, or even the next best thing, Seven Deadly Sins Season 1. And even if she was, you can't be emotionless in a badass way in a show like this because it's not just one character that's got chronic resting bitch face. That's a trick a writer can pull out of their head once before it immediately loses value every other use. But either way, yeah, this isn't that kind of show. Again, the best way I can describe it is that pretty much everyone gets a treatment and has a big moment they get to be the centerpiece of doing the thing they do best, which would be great in a regular anime. This is not a regular anime, though. This is a slice-of-life fantasy about a bored elf doing magic that has just enough action to not put you to sleep. And if you haven't guessed, the section where I talk about the things I like ended a while ago.
It's inferred that it was fucking awful because on the box art there are 2 small icons reading "I lack talent" and "fuck you."
So here's the premise. Pay attention. Here we go. They're done. They beat the bad guy. What? That's the premise, don't look at me. Literally, these 4 created world peace and then they all die except F to pay respects. And it's here where we get the catalyst for the rest of the show.
I hardly knew anything about him. 10 years with him wasn't nearly enough time to learn. I was aware that human lives are short, but this, why didn't I try to better know and understand you?
Nah, fuck you, that's your own damn fault. Don't come in here acting like the Grinch's heart grew 3 sizes that day. You're telling me you're hundreds of years old and you don't know the right way to make friends? Hold on, even if you are damn near immortal compared to everyone else, you're really about to tell me 10 years wasn't enough to get to know the motherfucker that well? That's like factually incorrect. The show flashes back and explains their friendship like 50 times and that's almost never the case when they do. Honestly, this show's got so many flashbacks that almost ruined the concept of flashbacks to me. Think about every time the momentum in a fight has gotten ruined because someone decided to put a flashback right in the middle of it.
This is gonna be terrible. Get up! I'm cooking. I'm on a roll. What's the matter with you?
Now imagine that times 100 just minus actually getting rewarded with the fights when you're done grinding out the flashbacks. I literally just talked about this in the Record of Ragnarok review too. I am 4 pages into this script and I already gotta start issuing apologies to shit I've talked about in the past. But with the sheer number of them, I gotta ask, wouldn't have telling the story of The Journey been a better anime than this? I assume that's a sacrilegious question if you actually like this show, but I ask because, to quote the old El Paso mascot, why don't we have both? This could just be the 2nd season, a Naruto Shippuden of a better anime. Okay, that's offensive to Naruto Shippuden. The Boruto of a better anime. Like, I really can't stress this enough. There are so many flashbacks that it's like you're watching two shows at once. And it's not a best of both worlds scenario. There are very few benefits to it because of how they decide to approach the method. Like, even when there's no reason to have a flashback, they still do it. In episode 15, this dude fights a monster and he flashes back to another dude telling him what to expect from the exact person standing behind him that he just so happened to become friends with 1 episode ago. Also, he can have the revelation that he needs to do what people ask him to do and trust them. And I am just compelled to ask, why? Because character writing? That's your final answer. You're sure about that. This guy joins their party and leaves after like 2.5 episodes. You could damn near take him out of the show entirely and nothing would change. Which reminds me, there's a fucking party I almost forgot 3 tangents ago. So there's Fried Chicken. She's the main character. Then there's Purple Girl, her apprentice. I will proceed to not even mention Purple Girl for the rest of the video. Then they find out the same place Frasier originally beat the Demon King with her first party might have also been where Heaven is, which is fantastic to hear. And do y'all care to explain how they beat the Demon King and that's it? They never noticed anything else of importance in the area? Well, I guess we'll figure out, right? I mean, we got 28 episodes to take our time getting there and learning everything there is to learn. Right? Hey man, cut them some slack. They put Journey in the title. Kind of. It's not about the destination, it's about the friends you make along the way. And the plot does eventually start up in the form of the first big fight. Now, I had expected this to be the turning point where the show would really start to kick into gear. But the demon died in like 2 minutes, and the conversation they had before the fight was just to set up the concept of magic improving over time. But what's really fucked up is the demons aren't even badly written if you keep watching the show. I like the little lore tidbits we get in terms of them as a species, it's just that them as characters are there, I guess? I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, they definitely mismanaged what good storylines they stumble into. Like, there's a scene where the demons are trying to kill Fracus in a jail cell she got put in for trying to kill them, because enough time's passed since the Demon King died and they're trying to use that as an opportunity to trick the humans into thinking they can finally have peace. But whatever, the dude goes down there into the prison and the music and lighting are all off. This is the pivotal scene where the demons start to actually confirm everyone's suspicions and do shit they shouldn't be, and the guy's just like, hey, I bet I'm stronger than you, and the episode ends. I seriously don't think I've ever seen wasted tension like that before. All I can think of is what if the Promised Neverland crew directed this scene. Now, by the grace of all that is holy, I know the one person dumb enough to defend this in the very specific way I call it out will show up, so let me make one thing perfectly clear. It can be argued that the show being focused around how overpowered Freight Train is could be expanded to include elements like animationography, music, dialogue, shit like that. And what I mean is, the show is literally from the perspective of a living, breathing, been there, done that. But there's a difference between sitting there and coming up with that idea and actually putting it into practice. Much less putting it into practice well. In other words, this shit was probably better off in someone's head, something that we'll talk about more later on. But what's important is it doesn't play to any strength that makes up for what it's purposely forcing itself to lack. It's just boring. Fratty Shack deadass murders someone with her bare hands and gets blood all over her, and the tone still treats it like a casual dialogue scene.
This is going to complicate things.
Like, what do you get from that? What do you need from that the show can't have without it? Because if I'm being honest with you, this whole scene shouldn't have even been in the script to begin with. The guy goes down there and acts like he's guaranteed to win, but that even if he isn't, everything's going according to plan. Then when the people in charge of the city use the slightest inkling of thought to figure out that the missing prisoner and the dead guard was on account of someone trying to kill Fran Drescher, they confront the demon emissary. And he says,
My, that idiot, Drat. He has ruined everything. So now it seems that violence is the only way to resolve this predicament.
So, here you are having to show your true colors, when if you had just attacked the city directly as soon as Phantom Tax got put in jail, you would have actually succeeded. Because, of course, the second they so much as exist in the same universe as her once she's fresh out, their perfect plan is over. She doesn't even have to do that much to kill their leader either. She tricks her into decapitating herself.
They go another player tip. You gotta kill yourself.
Like, just so we're clear here, in terms of power scaling, this woman is a Dale from King of the Hill level threat here. If she ever decides to turn evil, it is over. And this is just the introductory arc into the broader battling that happens as the show gets more violent. But I've broken it down in this way to show you that they really can't even do the most standard plot progression right. But you know what? Maybe I just hold that kind of thing to a higher standard. I personally enjoy shows that carefully lay down and execute the transition from lighthearted to, oh shit, this just went from 0 to 100 real fucking quick. It's a satisfying thing to see done right, and Froyo just doesn't want to, I guess. Just like like how they don't want to set up the premise right, just like how they don't want to write the main character right. Did I mention she wouldn't have even been locked up if she had just told the guards her name? Like, yeah, she's a legendary hero, and everybody conveniently forgot what she looks like, as if paintings and the fact that she never changes her clothes aren't a thing. But no, even besides that, they find the need to dedicate a portion of episode 9 to explaining why the ruler of this particular city owes her. Now again, I understand a certain amount of comedy and tone setting should be taken from the fact that right before this, Frailstorm is like, oh, I'm gonna be in prison for 3 years? That's crazy. I guess I'll need to do a lot of reading. But do I really have to explain how stupid this is? Regardless of people being brainwashed into thinking this is the best anime of all time, do I really need to make this video any longer than it already is? I think you can see why a get out of jail free card that the main character is written to not even care enough to use because everything is inconsequential is stupid. Like, we can keep asking ourselves questions like, why didn't she do this? Why didn't she do that? But I'm looking at the big picture here. Why exactly did they make this anime? So we can watch someone who's only kinda interested in being serious about her goals meander around? What's the point of anything then? Am I seriously the only one that expects more from an MC than that? Being the protagonist of a story is a big deal. You're like the cheerleader of the show. If the audience isn't excited to watch you succeed, you're done. That's it. And I'm not even talking about how she can one-shot any threat that comes her way. That ship sailed 4 paragraphs ago. So what? It's the God of War reboot? Her kids/friends are the only thing she has to lose, so we're supposed to care about them? Because I'm afraid I've got some bad news for you.
To make matters worse, there was no...
I haven't even mentioned the warrior dude, arguably the only character in the show that isn't an emotionless block of wood. But even then, he's such a bitch, I just want to pin him to the ground and go spelunking inside of him. And when I say spelunking inside of him, what I mean is I want a journey to Ungoro. I want one night in Karazhan, okay? I want to voyage to the sunken city. You can really insert any Hearthstone expansion name here, the point is homosexual intercourse. He seems like he would be prime meat for chastity cage, sissy, white boy feminization, black NTR hentai on Twitter. Not even necessarily because of his looks either, just because of his presence in the show. And once he's added to the party, they occasionally do this thing where the characters randomly get mad at each other. It sounds like I'm being vague for no reason, but no really. It's like there's an egg timer going off every few episodes and they need a third person in the party to be an intermediary. They even use that kind of wording in the show to describe it at one point. And it's here where we usually get to see some of the other emotions you can look forward to being displayed for you in this show, including but not limited to pouting, mild infuriation, confusion, and comedy relief that makes Burn the Witch look like Family Guy seasons 4 through 9. I will admit Old Man Vol in episode 16 made me laugh though. Maybe because he reminds me of the guy who drops my favorite sword in Dark Souls 2 mixed with I fucked 50 men! But you know what's funny? Dwarves can't emote in this show either because they all have giant beards. Like, it is fascinating from the ground up how restricted these characters are from having facial expressions. The first thing I could think to compare it to would be Star Trek, I guess, but Star Trek fans at least get what they want out of Star Trek when it hits. Even when this show does hit, I have a hard time of thinking of anyone who would enjoy it. Maybe people who make gifs of Studio Ghibli movies and put them on Tumblr? Like, I don't know. Eventually, though, we get into what I am forced to call the meat and potatoes of this anime, the Academy arc. An arc I was going to say starts off fine enough, but then I remembered Magi has an Academy arc too, and I used to think that shit was kind of mid before I forced myself to lower my standards watching this, so no, fuck you. Well, I have a history of glazing that anime, so reverse card, fuck me, actually. Either way, this is when we get introduced to a lot more blocks of wood. I kid you not, this bitch literally gets stabbed in the chest, and this is her reaction.
Well, that's that. Go, run as quickly as you can and find a fighter to depend on. I'm going home. It even ensures my safety on the way out.
Here's a fun game to play when watching this arc. Open literally any episode and click to a random point in it. If the screen has someone's eyes doing this, or their closed mouth lip flap looks like this, you lost the game because there's nothing impressive about finding that in this anime. Besides that, the Mimic Labyrinth that I refuse to call a dungeon like the characters do because this isn't a fucking video game universe is weird. First off, the lady giving the test lets them have these bottoms with golems inside of them to get them out and forfeit if they're about to die. And when you use the bottle, you shatter it on the ground and the golem just picks you up and runs. And yes, that was very funny, but not necessarily in a way that benefits the show. Assuming that alternatives do exist, you know, like one that teleports you out. You would assume the Mages Guild conducting this test would use something like that instead, because they wouldn't want the golem to de-fucking-molish anything in its path. You keep letting these things run wild in random ancient underground cities, you're gonna run out of places to send the test takers to. Again, that's an assumption in a world where magic has very few limits from how the characters explain things, but hopefully you can see where I'm coming from on this. I don't know, maybe if the lady was set up to be some kind of cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs ass mage that likes wacky experimental shit, this would have actually worked. Like, if this was World of Warcraft, not only would it have made sense to call this place a dungeon, but she would have been a goblin or a gnome or something to let her really be iconic. But I'm getting into crazy land here. I mean, that would require her to emote whatsoever. Maybe even have a vibrant character design. Nah, that's... what am I saying? Jesus, I'm really stepping out of line here, aren't I? I legit just said the word iconic when talking about Frieren, the least iconic anime of all time. Did I mention I officially apologize to Shield Hero and Demon Slayer for saying those shows have characters that frown too much? Now, after all that, the people start getting cornered by the final boss and it makes them fight mimics of themselves. Except for when it doesn't and it just sends a copy of Frambrosia to fight a group of people who have no hope of defeating her. This is one of those things where you feel like you're watching a writer come up with an idea rather than a show in and of itself. Like, the script isn't written to give the characters information, it's written to show you, the viewer, that exact copies of people can be made. Then it shows you some mirror matches. And then and only then does it show you what happens when the fight isn't a mirror match. But hear me out, not only is that a standard as fuck setup and payoff, wouldn't it have been more interesting to show that it could make a copy of anyone from the beginning? Don't even show the people who have to fight Fried Guys, Burgers, and Fries until the last second. Build up to that and let the audience come to the conclusion themselves right before it's revealed. People paying attention could use process of elimination to predict who it's gonna be ahead of time depending on how long you drag it out. I know for a fact if Oda from One Piece wrote this, he'd milk that shit for 30 chapters straight. Tekking 101 would have a field day.
Alright, Barry, hit me with it. Hakai!
And it's honestly annoying how even this late in the show, they probably never even considered something like that because spending so much time getting to know each and every character was more important to them. So instead we get more time allocated to people just sitting around like, hey, why is it that what's-her-face is the way she is? And the other person will be like, well, from what I can tell, it's da-da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, yeah. That's a straightforward way to write a show, I guess. Then randomly as fuck, there's this actually funny running gag where this old dude is just handing out ancient Chinese wisdom. He's like, plant yourself in this current moment. Listen closely to the world surrounding you. If the bitch keep her silverware in the fridge, you already know she got roaches. And then someone shows up behind the warrior guy who's barely a character like, hey, warrior guy who's barely a character, is that old guy your sensei or something? And the warrior guy who's barely a character is like, I don't even know who the fuck that is. He just shows up, says some Karate Kid type shit and leaves. Also, I will admit the mimic crystal monster taking the hair abilities of the lady giving the test is pretty cool. Not to mention, its face being monotone like everyone else is understandable because it's a magical entity that doesn't have feelings or the ability to talk in the first place. And while I'm at it, I really like this specific shot too. It dangling there in that spider web thing it made out of its hair is awesome. And that's right after it almost killed 2 people too. It's like it's hitting an emote after getting a double kill or something. It's just a shame a cool monster like that is a mimic of such a boring ass character.
It was a complete and utter shock. It was a complete and utter shock.
So yeah, at the end of the arc, the final test is getting interviewed by the super elf. Who is the super elf? Well, she actually taught the person who taught Fruit Loops. I like this character. Let me repeat that. I like this character that is in the show Frieren Beyond Journey's End. And I just said the character's name right for the first time in this whole video, so you know how serious I am. There is a tension when she is in the same room as the protagonist because she is more experienced and powerful than the protagonist. It is interesting to have her in the show at all because it makes you zoom out the food chain diagram in your head. So why is it that we don't even find out she exists until halfway through the show? You already know what I'm gonna say if you've gotten this far into the video. But this leads us into the final episode. You might notice something if for whatever reason you've been watching along with me though. It's 24 minutes. And they never got to heaven. Don't get me wrong, the last episode's fine, it's a more unrelenting character writing, that's not the problem. I especially sympathize with the dude who said he was born in the wrong generation and then just jumps Frieza in the middle of the night. He's like, psh, I probably could have beat the Demon King, but nobody cares about me. I bet if I kill you, they will though. That's good writing. Do more of that. Is what I would have said if this wasn't the last episode.
Yes, sirree. Thought about killing myself.
You know what? Fuck the story. I didn't even care. It's not like I wanted to see the end of the show or anything, Baka. Honestly, that shouldn't even be a surprise to you, but yeah, I was more just watching this shit out of morbid curiosity after the first 3 or 4 episodes. But that doesn't mean I'm letting this slide. Because I was under the assumption they would use the locational flashbacks to show how Frey Pacino and her party even beat the Demon King in the first place. Because if she's so OP, I don't understand how she couldn't have just done it herself. Like, genuinely, the second they explained how impossible it is to even make this bitch break a sweat in a life or death fight, I was at the very least interested in that one mystery. Because keep in mind, an antagonist doesn't count unless it's set up that they can believably defeat the main character in a one-on-one scenario. So how hard was it exactly to beat the Demon King to the point that Freezy Pop needed a random priest, a random dwarf, and a random human with a cape to stop him? I guess I'll never find out because I'm not watching another season of this shit. And the fact that I'm really about to say this as if it needs saying, I just can't, bro. But yeah, this isn't a story that needs 2 seasons to be told. This show is 28 episodes long. That is enough. That is more than enough. That is more than most people could ever ask for. And yes, I understand it's a show that stops to smell the roses and takes its time to tell its message. But in the end, the only thing that it ever really has to say that hasn't already been done a million times is some surface-level religious commentary because they're straight up looking for heaven. There's just one problem with that, and some eagle-eyed viewers might have already picked up on this, but, you know, literal VeggieTales has better religious commentary than this. But nah, it's a highly rated show that's not supposed to have a lot of action to carry it, which means if you don't like it, you're automatically shunned as an Adderall ketamine juiced up Zoomer. humor. I just feel like if the show had below average animation, it'd be hated. But because it's Madhouse and they have a good track record, more people watched it versus if it had been released by some random studio. And because a lot of people watch something, the chances of it becoming a pop culture thingamajig goes up too. And as far as probability goes, I mean, even a broken clock is right twice a day. Like, you can make a slow as fuck show where almost everyone's boring. You can do anything. But why would you assume people would want to watch that? Or like that? Of course, the show is proof that whether or not they do is irrelevant, but what I'm asking here is what type of person unironically pitches that? And more importantly, what kind of person unironically goes, yeah, sure, let's make 28 episodes of it? Boring ass motherfuckers is the answer, by the way. In closing, as far as I'm concerned, an adventure is only as good as how much the characters change along the way. And if you've been paying attention, you can probably see where I'm going with this. Freakoff cries once. Once in the entire show. She fears a total of 0 things. She does not suffer. There is no antagonist in this show. Therefore, there is no growth. Therefore, you shouldn't even consider this to be an anime with a story. To be perfectly honest with you, I don't know what to call this. It exists outside the confines of entertainment. It simply is. And I just wasted too much time talking about it. Have a good day.
Hey, Samantha, what do you want to get for Christmas? Fucked.